Oh
my God.
178 and a half, the official weight for Khamzat Chimaev.
That's awful.
What a weird fight week. Between, Khamzat throwing a spanner in Dana White's works to that bizarre main event of a fight that we got, to the questionable judging, the press conference cancellation. I mean, this was a chaotic week. I kind of feel bad for Dana White. On Friday, when it came out that Khamzat missed weight by 7.5 pounds and was not going to keep cutting, I assumed that Dana had Hunter Campbell chained down to his desk, just working overtime, forcing him to figure out a way to keep this card together, because it was a relatively weak card. So the fights that we ended up getting in the main event were a lot more enticing, to me at least, as a fan, to watch than the original fights that we were promised. I mean, I don't think I could have stomached Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson getting absolutely murdered by Jingliang and Khamzat Chimaev. But, man, Khamzat really screwed the pooch on this one. Because now what do you do with him, The majority of the top 5, they're either booked up or he's already fought them. Between Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards being engaged in that trilogy, to Bilal Muhammad fighting Sean Brady, and he already fought Gilbert Burns. So what do you do with a guy, I guess you can give him Colby Covington, but I know he's embroiled in that legal situation, and Dana said that he was cleared to fight, but I don't know if his legal representation would give him that opportunity, or at least they'd probably strongly advise against it, because he's trying to convince the jury that he suffered brain damage from that sucker punch from Jorge. I mean, aside from Colby Covington, it makes no sense for who Chimaev should fight next. Unless he wants to, go up to middleweight and take on the winner of Adesanya versus Pereira, because nobody's really in line for a title shot up there. It's crazy though, because when Khamzat missed weight, I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying, it's very convenient that he missed weight and was around that area of where Kevin Holland was, fighting at 180. So that allowed for them to kind of switch up the matchups and have Khamzat fight Kevin Holland, which I feel like there's no way that Dana White would do that. And if he did, I feel like somebody would have roped Jingliang into it so that he could have at least missed weight and not given up a 10-pound disadvantage to Daniel Rodriguez. And man, Jingliang, he took a lot of unwarranted losses this week. My guy, he got dripped out for the press conference, presumably worked on his English. He was about to gain a lot of fans, get some clout, and then Khamzat couldn't, he couldn't keep his emotions in check, and he Sparta kicked Kevin Holland backstage. So the press conference got canceled. Jingliang's easier fight against a bigger name and Tony Ferguson got pulled, and he ended up getting robbed. I think we can all agree that was a blatant robbery by Daniel Rodriguez, who was 10 pounds heavier. He was a young, legit contender with good striking, So poor Jingliang. I mean, these judges, man, how old is Jingliang? He's not a spring chicken either. So they kind of screwed him in terms of his career trajectory here. He's 34 years old. He's ranked number 14. Depending on how nice the UFC is to him, he might end up getting bounced out of the rankings because he lost to an unranked Daniel Rodriguez. So that's very unfortunate for him. But he seemed to have earned a lot of goodwill with the fans this week, though. So I don't know. Maybe that's good. Not many fights were of any consequence to any division, really, other than a few, like Norma Dumont maybe. But yeah, I mean, Kevin Holland though, the guy's a gangster. For all the talk of who's a gangster, I'm a gangster, all week, Kevin Holland took a fight against Daniel Rodriguez on 2 weeks' notice, And when that fight fell apart because of Khamzat, he said, yeah, I will take that fight, but only if it's 5 rounds. So he took a 5-round fight against the stylistic nightmare, who he probably knew he wasn't going to beat. So props to him. He's a very big company man, and I feel like the Dana White loves him already. So I feel like the UFC will reward him. They already rewarded him monetarily, I would presume, but I mean, they're probably going to give him somebody like, I don't know, Vicente Luque, maybe, or I don't know. I could see them giving him Stephen Thompson. If I'm Holland, though, I'm begging for that Luque fight. That's a guy that comes forward and doesn't really move his head, and got his chin cracked by Jeff Neal, who Kevin Holland incidentally beat on the regional scene. I feel like Kevin Holland's stock kind of rose this week, even despite that ragdolling. His stock, probably to the promoters, is pretty high right now. But the welterweight division, man, what a mess. Leon Edwards head kicked Kamaru Usman, and with that threw out all order, because now, you know, instead of having Khamzat Chimaev fight Kamaru Usman, he has to sit out and wait for the trilogy to happen. And in the meantime, he can maybe fight Colby Covington. Maybe, you know. There's guys like Stephen Thompson and Jorge Masvidal up there who are just kind of clinging on. I don't think they'll be there much longer. Within the next 2 years, I think they'll be gone. You know, guys like Michael Chiesa, which, I mean, who does Chiesa beat in this top 15? You know, other than Neil Magny. But yeah, it's a crazy division. Crazy division. Well, you know what? Crazy week, though, because that main event, Tony Ferguson had a bizarre performance. I mean, it was very bizarre. Tony, he moved to Greg Jackson's, I believe, where John Jones trained, and he seemed to have stuck to the game plan at first. You know, chopping the leg, coming forward a little bit, throwing out some straight punches, but it seemed like that Michael Chandler fight ruined him. I mean, he was afraid of being hit. It seemed like, I mean, you know, Tony Ferguson pre-knockout, pre-Justin Gaethje, honestly, he would have stood in the pocket, and if he would have turned his back, he wouldn't have ran. He would have, you know, tried to spinning elbow the guy. But, man, Tony Ferguson, as much as it pains me to say it, I think he's washed. I think he's done. He should have retired. But it was very funny. I think it was Greg Jackson in the corner. He was yelling, "Don't spin! Don't spin!" As if Tony Ferguson wasn't spinning and Dark Souls rolling to victory, you know, in the past decade or so. But that fight was just bizarre. I mean, between Nate Diaz just turning around, walking away, and saying, I'm not fighting this guy. Whatever. He's just running. You know? Nate Diaz was just talking to the cage, and when Tony would come up to him, that's when he'd re-engage. I think it was because he was kind of having trouble corralling Tony Ferguson and getting into distance with him to actually, like, do anything. So I think that might have been some 2,000 IQ plays there where Nate Diaz would kind of, you know, tempt him to come in and start striking again. But, man, talk about somebody that avoided a bullet. If Nate Diaz and the Chimaev fight went through like it was supposed to, I think he would have been torn up. That would have been ruthless. That would have been terrible. But now, the UFC's new little moneymaker is pretty much hated by more than half of the community, and Nate Diaz is walking away on a win on a major pay-per-view, and he's all but set up to go and box Jake Paul, you know? So good on, I mean, I hate the fact that that's what these fighters have to resort to make money, but good on Nate. You know, he gambled on himself. He got bailed out by luck with Khamzat Chimaev missing weight by that much, and he ended up riding high, which, you know, it's what you can only ask for these legends. Let's see, what else is on the card? The card was, it was kind of weird in terms of there wasn't much name value, but it still delivered. You know, there were a lot of fun scraps on there. Irene Aldana versus Macy Chiasson was a very back and forth fight in terms of clear round 1 for Irene, clear round 2 for Macy Chiasson. You know, both girls look good. It was a good scrap. Johnny Walker was able to out-grapple the Sambo specialist, Ian Kutelaba, which was very nice to see, you know, because especially with the rough stretch of fights that Johnny Walker's been having and the damage that he's been taking. Julian Erosa absolutely schooled Hakeem Dawodu. You know, mean Hakeem, he's out here mean mugging you and handing out split decision losses, but Julian Erosa said not tonight. Jailton Almeida, the Brazilian Habib, he did his thing. You know, poor pleasure man. Fresh off that Contender Series win, he got fed straight to the wolves. And another feel-good story of the night, though, Chris Barnett and Jake Collier. That was, you know, when you think about what Chris Barnett's been through recently, I think he had to make the decision to take his wife off of life support 6 days prior to his last fight. I mean, you know, I hope the guy, I hope the guy's grieving well and you know, deals with it healthfully, or whatever the word is. And on the headliner for the early prelims, Norma Dumont versus Danielle Wolf. Danielle Wolf was ready for the UFC, but Bo Nickel wasn't. Huh? That's just crazy. You know, it's crazy how hypocritical Dana White could be sometimes. But you know, women's MMA, they need that roster filled out. So I can understand why that happened. But I mean, Norma Dumont looked like a world beater out there in the striking against the Golden Gloves. You know, they hyped her up. They hyped Danielle Wolf up as this like master boxer. You know, and Norma Dumont, she went out there and showed her what's what. And she got all of Twitter buzzing, though, about that. Well, I'll let Laura Sanko say it, but, you know, I think we all know what I'm talking about.
You owned it, by the way.
Yeah. Jig is up.
It.
Yeah.
All right.
Where is Chris?
Waiting on Chris Barnett.
She is driving a dump truck. My goodness.
Hey, I told you, she's a linebacker.
Driving a dump truck.
Don't worry, Amanda. We were looking at it, too. All right. So I know that this isn't what I usually do, but I just wanted to try out something new, see if I could gain a little bit of traction to the channel. I started a Twitter for the channel, and a TikTok as well. I'm thinking about doing an Instagram too, but it's just so much work. So I'll have all of that in my bio, or in the description of the video. So, you know, if you want to support the channel, go check out those accounts and follow them if you use those social media apps. And you know, just it would be great if you could engage with the video. You know, just go down in the comments, say something. You know, be mean, be nice, whatever. Any feedback is I would very much appreciate that. Like the video, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and I'll see you next week.